Happy Friday. I am diving into everything hormones and metabolism and perimenopause and menopause and belly fat today. So we're going to dig into a lot of stuff. You might want to grab a glass of water or a cup of tea while I start chatting here. And I'm going to dive in soon. Before I dive in, I want to welcome everyone that is new to this community and just quickly tell you who I am if you are new to this group. So just very quickly, my name is Haley. I think you know that. But I am a nutrition coach, a certified nutrition coach, as well as a personal trainer. And I've been in the health and wellness industry for over 10 years. And I have in the past probably 8 years really taken a deep dive into everything hormones, and it started off with some of my own health issues. When I was in my mid-30s, I was really struggling with digestive issues. I had chronic insomnia. I had hypoglycemia. I had 3 miscarriages. I had adrenal fatigue. I had all kinds of things going on, and that's what kind of led me into diving into everything hormones. And along the way, I started using what I was learning and applying it to my clients, and started getting really interested in menopause and perimenopause, because I was noticing that back then, when I was still in my 30s, a lot of my older clients were struggling with stubborn weight loss. And so I was like, well, what is going on here? So that's kind of what led me into it. And what I'm going to share with you guys today is just very much an overview of the different hormones that I've been researching and studying, and just how they're changing during this phase in our life. And I want to do this not to overwhelm you. I want to do this to empower you, because I know that there are a lot of articles out there that say that weight gain is inevitable during perimenopause and menopause, and maybe your doctor has told you that it's normal and there's nothing you can do about it, or maybe they just gave you the frustrating advice of just eat less and exercise more and everything will take care of itself. And you're like, but I'm only eating 1,200 calories a day and I'm still not losing weight. So what on earth is going on? So what I want you to understand or take away from today is that 2 things. So number 1, it's more than calories at this point in your life. You cannot just cut your calories like you did in your 20s or your 30s to lose weight, because your hormones are changing. And in order for us to have a healthy body composition and in order to manage our weight, we need to have hormonal balance, or we need to take into account some of the changes that are happening. And so with everything that I'm going to go over today is I'm going to go over some of the different hormones that are changing, and then I'm going to go into why they're changing. I won't spend too much time there, and I'll talk about what you can do with that knowledge, knowing that that hormone is changing in a specific way. And at the very end, I'm going to tie it all together, because what you're going to notice as we go through this is that certain things or certain habits will come back more than once. And so at the very end, I'll kind of just give you a general summary of the things that you can work on. And then again, just throwing it out there that you don't need to change this overnight. You can work on this over time. Okay, so let's dig in. Before I keep going, however, I would love to know if you're catching this live or if you're watching the replay. So if you are watching this live, hello, just give me a hello in the comments. And if you catch this on replay later, just put replay in the comments so that I know that you are getting this information. All right, so let's start. The first one I want to talk about is progesterone. And progesterone is one of your main sex hormones, along with estrogen. Most women know the term estrogen. And then there's also testosterone, which is oftentimes associated as a male sex hormone, but we have it too, and it does play an important role. But progesterone is what it does in the body is it opposes estrogen. And so they're kind of like yin and yang, and they like to be in balance, because when there's either too much progesterone or too much estrogen, we start to feel a little bit crappy. And what happens during perimenopause, so sort of like age 35 plus, is we start to see a decline in our progesterone levels. And this is really important because it starts to decline at a faster rate than estrogen, which places us into a period of our life where we are actually likely estrogen dominant. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit more in a little bit. But understand that it's going to decline. It's one of the first sex hormones that starts to decline. The other thing that plays a big role in our estrogen levels is something called anovulatory cycles, which also start to happen in perimenopause. Anovulatory cycles are when we don't ovulate, which makes sense. In perimenopause, everything's starting to malfunction and sometimes we don't ovulate. But what happens is that when we ovulate and we release a follicle and that follicle pops open and the egg comes out, that follicle becomes something called the corpus luteum. That's where progesterone comes from. So if you're having cycles where you're skipping ovulation, then you're having cycles where you're having a dramatic drop in progesterone, and that's going to have an impact on how you feel. The other big player when it comes to progesterone is stress and adrenals. So most of your progesterone is produced by the corpus luteum, but your adrenals also produce some of your progesterone. But your adrenals also produce the stress hormone cortisol, and your body will always, 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 always prioritize cortisol over progesterone. So it's sometimes referred to as the pregnenolone steal, which basically means that stress steals your progesterone. Okay, so those are kind of the big three. One thing to understand when it comes to progesterone is that it protects us. It's kind of often referred to as our calming hormone, and it protects us against the effects of stress. And when we have less progesterone, we are more stress reactive. We don't respond as well to stress, which drives up cortisol. And cortisol happens to be a fat storing hormone. So when it comes to weight management, there's like fat storing hormones, hormones that trigger the body to take energy and store it. And then there are hormones that trigger the body to take energy from the fat cells and burn it. Obviously, we want to prioritize those ones, and we want to support healthy levels of those that trigger fat storing. Cortisol is one of those. So just understand, super big relationship between progesterone and cortisol. Progesterone down, cortisol up. Okay, just remember that. What else? Another interesting fact, but not so interesting because it sucks, is that you have a lot of cortisol receptors in your belly fat. And that's why cortisol is often referred to as the belly fat hormone or the stress gut hormone, because it drives fat gain right to the belly. So again, we're going to dive into cortisol a little bit more, but just understanding the importance of keeping cortisol levels in check and understanding why they are going up more because of those declining levels of progesterone can help. Okay, so how do we support progesterone levels? So they are naturally declining, and you do have these anovulatory cycles. That's going to happen. So what you want to do is you want to minimize anything else that can throw progesterone off is essentially what you can do. So managing stress and cortisol, which I'm going to dig into very shortly because that takes up a little bit more room. But that is like the number one thing you can do. Just again, remember the adrenals produce progesterone, but not when there's cortisol, because the body is like, I don't even have time for your progesterone. I got to deal with this stress. Okay. So managing stress is going to be super, 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 super huge. The other thing, and this goes for all hormones, is making sure that you're eating fat, because cholesterol is the precursor to pregnenolone, which produces progesterone, and it's the precursor to many of your hormones. And so if you're on a low-fat diet, you're probably gonna suffer with your hormones because you don't have the building blocks, right? You need fat. So that's why I'm not a huge fan of low-fat diets. I'm just going to put that out there. The other thing that you can do is that there are certain nutrients that the body uses in order to produce progesterone. Vitamin B6 B6, zinc, magnesium, and vitamin C are the four main ones. So you want to make sure that you're not deficient in any of those nutrients, and making sure that you're eating plenty of vegetables. I love vegetables, as you know, and fruit, anything that can support those vitamins and minerals in your body. And then you can also talk to your doctor about potentially supplementing with bioidentical progesterone. This is something that I have done in the past just because I was really suffering with adrenal fatigue and therefore low progesterone and insomnia and anxiety and like bad moods. And so I supplemented with bioidentical progesterone for a while, and it really helped. Okay, so, and then back to cortisol, just taking a step back, because again, I truly believe that managing cortisol is going to have the biggest impact on the health of your progesterone levels, because we know that it's going to decline, but we want to give the adrenals the best chance possible to ensure that it can still produce progesterone. So a couple of things that you can do in order to manage cortisol. Obviously, managing stress, right? That's a big one. Mental stressors, as much as possible. Tricky, but you know, we've got to start somewhere. The other thing that you can do is you can purposely chase relaxation. Meditation, yoga, tai chi, a hot bath, saunas, whatever it is, like anything that is going to shift you out of fight or flight, which is that stress mode, and into rest and digest, is going to support your adrenals. The other big thing is going to be to eliminate any physical stressors, because to your body and to your brain, mental stressors and physical stressors are the same thing, and your body will respond in the same way by jacking up cortisol, which again is that fat storing hormone. So some physical stressors would be chronic caloric restriction, fasting for too long, food sensitivities, toxins in the environment, which we're going to dig into in a little bit, going too low carb for too long, overtraining, or any kind of endurance training. I'm really sorry if you love marathons and running, but it's not the best for your cortisol levels. Sorry, don't shoot me, I'm just the messenger. Blood sugar management is going to be really important as well. So just learning how to stabilize your blood sugar levels, because it's really stressful on the body when our blood sugar levels go up and then they drop down and then they go up. So we need to learn how to stabilize them. Making sure that you're prioritizing sleep. You're going to hear me say that with almost every single hormone that we're going to talk about. But poor sleep is going to raise cortisol. It's a little bit of a vicious cycle because cortisol also makes it harder to sleep. We can do a whole topic on that. And then reducing inflammation, because cortisol happens to be an anti-inflammatory hormone. So if you've got chronic inflammation, then you're going to have chronic cortisol. Okay, so that's the first one. That was a bit of a big one. The next one I want to go into is estrogen. And with estrogen, there's a couple of things that you need to understand. So number one is that estrogen, when it comes to perimenopause and menopause, perimenopause is actually, I've read this book that describes it perfectly as estrogen's storm season. That's the title of the book. It's a good one, look it up. But what that helps us understand is that during definitely the earlier phases of perimenopause, estrogen is like all over the place. Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low. Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low, which is why we are like crazy like teenagers, because our hormones, literally estrogen, are bouncing all over the place until the end of perimenopause, when they start to decline. And when that happens, when they start to decline, that's when you're going to, this is why women who kind of like are in later phases of perimenopause, or they've just entered postmenopause, that's when a lot of the weight gain can happen, even in women that are paying really, really good attention to their diet and to their nutrition, is because naturally what happens is when we don't have as much estrogen, just our body composition changes, and where we store fat changes. Estrogen makes us store fat around our hips and our thighs and our butt. And when estrogen goes away, we start to store it in our belly. It just naturally changes where we store fat. And here's another little thing that you may or may not know, but when your body, when your ovaries are no longer producing estrogen, we still need estrogen. It's like a necessary hormone for our well-being. So our fat cells actually start to produce estrogen. So it makes sense that we're going to start getting or building up fat, right? It's our body's way of trying to protect us. What else? Estrogen also protects our muscle mass, and we're going to dig into that later, but just wanted you to understand the relationship of lower levels of estrogen and how our body fat starts to move from our hips to our belly. So what can we do? So here's the other thing. Sorry, I skipped one very important piece, which is insulin resistance and estrogen and that connection. So a lot of literature will, if you start digging into this, you will realize that estrogen allows us to be more insulin sensitive. I'm not going to dive into it too much here, but here's what you need to know. So when you eat foods like anything that's got more starch in it or more sugar, it's going to raise your blood glucose levels or your blood sugar levels. Insulin is then released by the pancreas to take that blood sugar and pull it into your cells or store it for later use as energy. When we are insulin resistant, what happens is that our body just starts to ignore it. And so our body produces, or our pancreas produces more and more insulin to try and shift the sugar out of our bloodstream. And so now we have chronically high blood glucose and chronically high insulin. And that is typical of a pre-diabetic or a type 2 diabetic. But here's the thing. Estrogen protects us against insulin resistance. So when our estrogen levels start to drop, we naturally become insulin resistant. This is why women post-menopause, we are way more at risk of developing type 2 diabetes if we're not changing our diet, because we simply cannot manage carbs the way we used to, okay? So that's a super important connection that I want you guys to take away from that. Now, when we can't jack up our estrogen levels. Like our ovaries stop functioning. They get tired. They call it quits. So you can't stop that. But understanding that connection between estrogen and insulin resistance empowers you to know that you've got to start working on your insulin levels. You've got to manage your insulin levels. There are a couple of different things that you can do. Eating lower glycemic foods. Did you guys, I don't know if you caught my chat last Friday on the low glycemic index, but there are certain foods that do not jack up your blood glucose as much. So you want to make sure you're focusing on that. Swapping out sugar and starch for healthy fats. You guys know I'm a really big fan of low carb, healthy fats, and this is one of the main reasons that I think it works fantastically for women our age. You also want to make sure that you eat plenty of protein. Protein will stabilize your blood glucose. That's what it's all about. We've got to stabilize blood glucose to avoid constantly jacking up blood glucose and constantly jacking up insulin. Plenty of fiber. Fiber is going to be good. Sleep, once again. Stress, managing stress. Stress is a really big one here. You're going to see they're all totally interconnected, but stress causes cortisol. Cortisol gives us like a rise in blood glucose to give us the energy to run away from a bear, which then also gives us more insulin and then causes insulin resistance. So they're all really, really, really interconnected. And then the last one is intermittent fasting. That can be a really great tool for helping to really lower our insulin levels. So as you can see, there's still a lot we can do, but we just need to understand what's happening to our body so that we can make smart decisions about our nutrition and our lifestyle. Okay, so next one up, I want to talk about estrogen dominance. Now, I just talked about lower levels of estrogen, but you can be estrogen dominant with low levels of estrogen. Because when it comes to estrogen dominance, what you need to understand that it's always where estrogen is in relation to progesterone, which we talked about at the beginning. And if you remember, progesterone declines faster than estrogen. So perimenopause is pretty much for most women, a phase of our life where we are either estrogen dominant or definitely prone to estrogen dominance. The other thing to consider, and you can go back to progesterone to learn more about why that one's dropping down if you missed it. So I'm not going to go into that again. But another thing to understand about estrogen is that we are literally swimming in a sea of estrogen, environmental estrogens, the dairy, the meat that we consume, unless you're consuming grass-fed, grass-finished, and organic grass-fed dairy. But if you're eating conventional dairy or conventional beef, you are eating estrogens. It is in the water that we drink. And this is gross, but like all the women in the world that take birth control and then they pee, and then that pee goes into our water source, and then we get to have all of their estrogens. Cosmetics, cleaning products, they're everywhere. They are everywhere. And this is becoming very problematic because this is one of the big sources of estrogen dominance. It just adds to a phase in our life when we're already prone to estrogen dominance. Another thing that you need to understand when it comes to estrogens is that your body is always trying to maintain balance, right? It's always trying to maintain balance. And so when you do have excess estrogens, your body is going to try to naturally detoxify those estrogens. It's going to try and get rid of them. And in order to do that, you need a very healthy liver and a very healthy gut. Because your liver is the first step. It needs to detoxify them and it needs to get them starting to circulate to get them out of you. But once they get into your gut, if you don't have a good healthy gut, you're basically just going to reabsorb them and they're just going to keep cycling around and around and around. So liver and gut health are going to be super important. What else do you need to know there? I'm going to stop there. I could keep going on estrogen, but I feel like I feel that's enough. So how do we avoid estrogen dominance? Or not, you're not going to necessarily avoid it, but you definitely want to minimize it, right? Because, it's going to be hard to avoid just because it's estrogen storm season. That is perimenopause. But we can avoid estrogen dominance, or we can sort of minimize the impact. So avoiding as much as possible environmental toxins. So cleaning up your cosmetics, cleaning up your cleaning products, trying to avoid plastics like BPA. I'm sure you've heard of this stuff, but maybe you didn't realize what an impact it has on your weight management, or perhaps you didn't realize that it's even more important at this phase in your life. So I just want to put that out there. Making sure that if you are going to eat dairy or if you are going to eat red meat, you want to get it from healthy sources, organic, grass-fed, grass-finished, pasture-raised, all of these words that I remember when I first started reading about it all, I was like, la, 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 whatever. No, it really does have an impact. So, eating plenty of fiber for gut health, supporting your liver, avoiding too much alcohol because alcohol will also increase your estrogen levels. We don't want to increase them, not during perimenopause at least. And then there's better ways to increase estrogen than alcohol. And then the other thing that I want to, again, and this goes back to what I said at the beginning, and you're probably not going to like this, but one great way to avoid estrogen dominance is to really control your weight, because especially as you're leading into menopause, because once you go into that post-menopause phase, your body and when your ovaries are no longer producing estrogen, your body is going to start producing estrogen in your fat cells. So the more fat cells you have, the more estrogen you're going to produce. And so you want to really keep that weight off as much as possible as you're moving into menopause. Okay, next up, I want to talk about sarcopenia and age-related muscle mass loss. And I know that you all have heard this because this is literally what every single article on menopause and weight gain talks about, a slower metabolism. But I'm here to give you this mega source of empowerment, is that you may think like it's inevitable, like my metabolism's slowing down with age. The biggest part, or the biggest role inside of that declining metabolism, is the loss of muscle mass. And this is something that you can prevent. This is really, really important. So sarcopenia, again, age-related muscle mass loss, is going to be one of the biggest determining factors of your metabolic rate, because muscle mass is metabolically active tissue. The more muscle you have, the faster your metabolism is going to be. So, understanding that, let's talk about what you can do to protect muscle mass and avoid sarcopenia and upregulate your metabolism. They're super simple. I want you to eat more protein, okay? More protein. You need protein. Protein has a thermogenic effect, which basically means that it just literally burns calories to get those calories. And so it will rev up your metabolism, but it also is the building blocks of building more muscle. So you've got to give your muscle something to work with. The other thing you need to do is you need to move. You need to move. 3 times a week is all it takes. 3 exercise sessions a week to prevent sarcopenia. Look it up. You will read this. 3. And resistance training is the best, right? Or some kind of strength training. Anything where you're like lifting weights or doing squats or lunges or push-ups. But even walking, even if you're just like, I don't want to do resistance training, Haley, you can do walk. Let me just stop my phone from ringing there. Okay, next up, don't diet. I'm saying it again because, and if you've listened to me before, you know that chronic caloric restriction will down-regulate your metabolism. So you don't want to add that double whammy. There are strategies that you can incorporate into your nutrition and your lifestyle to lose weight without chronically cutting your calories down to 1,200. And then consume alcohol in moderation. That one's going to come back a few times, but there is a really big connection between alcohol consumption and difficulty putting on muscle mass. So if you're struggling with muscle mass, you might want to kind of ease off the wine and the beer. Okay, next up, hypothyroidism. This is another really important one that women need to understand when it comes to women and hypothyroidism and perimenopause and menopause. Simply put, older women are more prone to hypothyroidism than men and younger women, and oftentimes perimenopause or menopause can be a phase in our life that just tips the scale and triggers hypothyroidism. So we really need to be aware of hypothyroidism. Hypothyroidism very quickly is when your thyroid slows down, right? So it's not producing as many thyroid hormones. And what that will do is it will slow down your metabolism. Estrogen dominance is one of the potential causes of triggering hypothyroidism. So go back and listen to what I talked about there, as well as stress. So it brings us back to stress management once again. When it comes to just knowing that we're more at risk and what we can do to support our thyroid, number one, regular testing. I really firmly believe that at this age, we need to have an idea of what our hormones are doing. And there's a couple of different tests that I would recommend, but definitely getting your thyroid tested on a regular basis just to see what's happening, especially if you're struggling with weight gain or you're struggling to lose weight. There's a really good potential that your thyroid is having some kind of impact on your progress. You also want to make sure, obviously, that you're eating nutrient-dense foods. So similar to what I was talking about with progesterone, there are certain nutrients that we need in order to just have a proper functioning thyroid. Selenium, zinc, and I'm missing one. Iodine is another big one. Anyways, we can talk about all these more at another time. Supporting healthy levels of estrogen, like avoiding that estrogen dominance, stress management. The other big thing to kind of keep in mind here is that for a lot of women who do develop hypothyroidism, it's actually an autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's. And so making sure that you are getting tested for any kind of antibody to make sure that if you need to know if it's autoimmune, because if it is, then there are certain foods that can trigger that autoimmune condition even more. Avoiding diets, once again. And this next one is really for my low carbers in the group, avoiding ultra low carb for too long. I'm a really big believer in carb cycling, as you know, mainly because I think it's easier to maintain, but also because there are plenty of articles and research to suggest that too low carb, too long for too long has a negative impact on our thyroid. And to me, that's enough to be like, okay, I'm not going to do it every single day, all day, every day, less than 20 grams. I just don't think it's a healthy approach. Okay, next up, here's another really big one to understand is the hormone ghrelin. So ghrelin is your hunger hormone. When your body produces ghrelin, ghrelin sends a signal to your brain to eat. Now, here's the interesting thing. During perimenopause, your ghrelin levels go up. I know, it's like Mother Nature is a real bitch. So that means that you have more hunger. Your appetite goes up, you have more cravings, and you have a tendency to overeat. And so what we need to do is we need to kind of keep that in mind and really be attentive to how we are eating and what we are eating in order to control our appetite. So what I recommend is really avoiding junk food, like the highly palatable junk food, processed foods that are super easy to overeat, right? We want to try and avoid them, and we want to swap them out for very dense, unprocessed foods. And you may have heard me talk about my favorite trifecta: protein, fiber, fat. Protein, fiber, fat. That's going to help to control those ghrelin levels. Don't diet. I'm saying it again. And the reason being is that when we diet, when we chronically restrict our calories, our metabolism adapts. And one way it adapts is by increasing ghrelin. So we don't want a double whammy there. The other thing to consider, and again, I'm really sorry if you're a runner and you love endurance training, but long bouts of cardio drive up hunger, which is why in my program, I don't do cardio. There's no cardio in my program. My program is walking, and it is short, intense workouts. And that's one of the things, like, I don't want to drive up your hunger even more. And then prioritizing sleep, because the research does show that when we have poor sleep, we have more ghrelin. And I know for some of you, you're like, easier said than done, Haley. We can work on that. But just, again, this is an overview. It's just to set you up to understand there's a lot that you can do with your nutrition and your lifestyle to, again, have some control over what is happening to your body, okay? All right, next up that I want to talk about is inflammation. Estrogen and progesterone have a anti-inflammatory effect on the body. And so as those hormones start to decline, we become more prone to inflammation. Women in later phases of perimenopause and menopause or postmenopause, they just naturally have more inflammation. And inflammation, unfortunately, triggers weight gain and makes weight loss a little bit harder. So we have to do what we can in order to reduce inflammation. So some of the things is an anti-inflammatory diet. So avoiding inflammatory foods and eating more anti-inflammatory foods. So some of the inflammatory foods would be sugar, refined flours, seed oils. Those are kind of like your big ones. Anything processed. What else? Dairy can be inflammatory, grains, alcohol. And replacing those with anti-inflammatory foods. Some of the big ones would be like avocados, olive oil, some spices like turmeric, and we can dig in. I'm not going to do a whole thing on that right now, but just understanding that your diet will have an impact on inflammation. Eliminating food sensitivities, because if you have a food sensitivity and you're eating that all the time, you are triggering chronic inflammation. So you got to figure out what your body likes and what it doesn't like and get rid of it. Managing stress, because stress causes inflammation. See, can you see how it's coming back? A lot of the same things. Focusing on your digestive health, prioritizing sleep, and fasting. Again, I'm coming back to fasting because intermittent fasting, the research shows once again that it helps to reduce inflammation. So I do think it's a great strategy when you're doing it the right way. Okay, the next one I want to talk about, and we're almost done here, is leptin resistance, which leptin is another one of your appetite hormones. So ghrelin is the hunger hormone. Leptin is the satiety hormone. And it tells your brain that you are full and you can stop eating. And typically speaking, what happens is that when we gain weight, when we have extra fat on our bodies, we have more leptin. And it was designed that way. Like, your body's really smart, right? So when you gain weight, your body should produce more leptin to tell your brain, we're good, we got some stored energy, back off the food. But what happens is that with some of the foods that we're eating, those highly palatable junk foods, and when we start to gain weight, we develop leptin resistance. The same as we do with insulin resistance. So we're producing leptin, but the body isn't listening. And so the brain is never getting this signal that you are satiated, and therefore you want to just keep eating and eating and eating and eating. And while there's no, from what I can tell, there's no direct correlation between menopause, perimenopause, and leptin resistance. However, knowing that we are prone to weight gain, I think this is something that we need to start thinking about, because as we do gain weight, we are going to become more leptin resistant, and there are things that we can do to, again, support healthy levels of leptin. An anti-inflammatory diet, once again, prioritizing sleep, once again, reducing your intake of fructose. Fructose causes leptin resistance. Fruit has fructose, and I know that fruit is considered a super healthy snack and a super healthy option. I think it is a great healthy snack. I don't think we should be pounding back fruit all day long. I have it on occasions, and I think that that is probably a safe choice bet for most women. Making sure you're getting protein, making sure you're getting fiber, incorporating intermittent fasting because it helps with leptin resistance, and incorporating movement, especially high intensity workouts. So high intensity workouts, like where it feels hard and it feels heavy, those are the ones that are gonna help to regulate your leptin. And if you do have leptin resistance, it's gonna help you get out of that vicious cycle. Okay, what else do I have left here? You guys must be getting tired of hearing me put all this into words. And I don't wanna, again, I don't wanna overwhelm with this. I just wanna show you all of the different changes, but also empower you with the knowledge that we can make changes, we can work with our body. So I'm gonna speed it up here very quickly. I just wanna talk super quickly about another hormone called adiponectin. And this is one that is not usually well known, and there's not much information out there on adiponectin, but what it's involved in regulating glucose levels, which is going to be important for insulin resistance, as well as how we break down fat. So our ability to take fat from our fat cells and turn it into energy. Adiponectin is a good hormone. This is a fat burning hormone. And at perimenopause, adiponectin levels go down. I'm telling you, it's like the perfect storm. But again, there's lots we can do. So that makes it harder for us to burn fat. Like, we literally lose our ability to burn fat, which is why we need to train our body to burn fat. So what we can do to increase adiponectin is move, exercise regularly, like ideally every single day, 30 minutes of something. It doesn't mean you have to go for a run 7 days a week, but like some kind of combination of walking, resistance training, maybe some high intensity training, that can really help. Then here's another really big one, is getting more monounsaturated fats in your diet. So possibly swapping out some of the saturated fats. I love fat, and I love saturated fats, but I'm just saying that within this phase of life, shifting more to like a Mediterranean style fat, olives, avocados, nuts and seeds can be really helpful. Making sure you're getting enough omega-3s, which you can get from fatty fish, right? And making sure that you are getting your fiber. Those are the 4 tips for adiponectin. Lots and lots of fiber. 35 grams a day is what we're supposed to get. I'm pretty sure most of us are not getting 35 grams a day. All right, and then the final one I wanted to talk about is human growth hormone, which I talked about in one of my other talks last week. So I'm going to do this one really quickly. But human growth hormone basically helps us to build muscle. More muscle, faster metabolic rate. And as estrogen levels decline, growth hormone or human growth hormone also starts to decline. So we need to kind of take that into account, because what's going to happen is we're going to have less muscle, more fat, more insulin resistance, and then as a result, we're gaining weight. So prioritizing sleep, I'm saying it again, increasing the intensity of your workouts. That is why in my program, I do the very super short, very intense workouts, because they are known to boost human growth hormone. And the last one, intermittent fasting. One more time. When women practice intermittent fasting, they naturally develop more human growth hormones. So it is a great strategy. So that's it. Those are all the different hormones that I have been researching and how they're changing and affecting our body composition through perimenopause, through menopause. Putting it all together, I know it sounds complicated and it probably is overwhelming when you hear me talk about them all. It's not that complicated. You got to eat nutrient-dense foods, making sure that you're getting plenty of protein, making sure that you're getting plenty of vegetables, low glycemic vegetables, fiber, healthy fats. Those are the things that you need to be focusing on. And then you need to sleep. You need to get a lot of sleep. You need to work on your sleep. Even if you have insomnia because of menopause, don't give up. Keep researching. Try your best. Set yourself up for success. Get some sleep. Move, 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 move. You need to move. You cannot, and this is one of the reasons that women gain weight during menopause, is that we just naturally become more sedentary. You cannot be sedentary. You've got to get up, you've got to move, you've got to exercise. Even if all you're doing is walking, you need to do that. Get your fiber. Get your fiber. Fiber is going to be so important for a number of reasons. It's going to help with your gut health. It's going to help you to detoxify those estrogens. It's going to control your appetite. It's going to do so many things for you. Intermittent fasting. Start looking into intermittent fasting, because that is one of the strategies. That's one tool that can help you to lose weight without overly restricting your calories. And by now, hopefully you know that that is not going to serve you. So intermittent fasting is something to look into. What else? Managing your stress. Managing your stress is going to be so important. I really, 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 really believe that stress, and this actually not just me, research suggests that women that are stressed out go have a shittier menopause or a terrible time going through perimenopause, as opposed to women who are practicing stress management. So you have to start practicing stress management. It doesn't matter what you do. Pick something that you like, but start to try to relax a little bit more. So that's it. That's like my big overview of trying to understand the hormonal changes that are happening. Don't be overwhelmed. Feel empowered. Understand that you have some control. You need to learn how to work with your hormones. You need to figure out what is happening, what is changing, and just adjust your nutrition, adjust your lifestyle to support the changes that are happening in your body right now. I'm going to continue to do these videos on Fridays. I'm going to continue to give you guys this information. But as you know, if you need help, if you need more support, if you want to just be told exactly what to do, I do have a program. I'm calling it Perimenopause Body Solutions. I'm rebranding. It was Flat Belly Over 40 formula, but it's going to be called Perimenopause Body Solutions. And I will show you exactly how to apply all of this so you don't have to worry about it. I will tell you exactly how to eat, when to train, how to train. I'll keep you accountable. I will be there for you for 90 days. So if you do want to learn more about that program and get more support, you know where to find me. And if not, have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for watching to the very